each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's
Isaiah Barnwell, formerly of Sweet Honey and the Rock, wrote a piece quite a few years ago called We Are. And these are the lyrics to that song. We are our grandmother's prayers, our grandfather's dreaming, and the breath of our ancestors. We are filled with imagination and hope, big dreams and endless possibilities. We are different, yet we are all the same. We are one. I've always felt that we need to perform as one, and we need to live as one, and we need to breathe as one. We need to do everything as one. And this particular song just became almost kind of an anthem for the choir, and one we sung many, many times here at the church during services. And we were lucky enough to be able to sing in Romania quite a few times. So we started putting out feelers about what we should do, and we contacted the Unitarian Universalist Partnership Church Council, the UUPCC, who then put together a standard itinerary, told us how much it was going to cost, and a few other details of what was going on, and we started from there. And then we found out, you know something, we can't do this without raising money. And we decided to hold a few different fundraising activities. One was through Faithify, which is the Unitarian version of GoFundMe. The next was a grant with the Unitarian Universalist Funding Program. Then we held a choir concert at the holiday season. We had an art raffle, and finally, we got in just a large amount of private donations. All of a sudden, we have the money. It's time to start preparing to go.
Well, the first thing that went through my mind was that I'd heard that there's a Unitarian church in Romania, but I've never been to Eastern Europe, Romania. All of that was very intriguing to me.
My thought was, well, it'll be a concert and we'll get to perform in a country where I never had any idea about going. And I just thought, well, this will be fun. You know, I get to go with 20 plus of my favorite people and sing and see a place I've never seen before. So, you know, what's not to like about that, right?
We knew that we had a wonderful choir, and with Tom Steffen's help, we put together a program that we worked on more than any other program we ever worked on.
The original objective of the trip was to go to Romania to interact with fellow Unitarians and sing 4 concerts. That was the original idea. Nothing really other than that. Some people said, well, why do we need to go to Transylvania? And the answer to that question is really very simple. We knew we had to raise money. And I don't believe that we could have raised very much money to go to Ireland. We needed to go to a place that made sense, where we would learn about our religion and just join with a bunch of other Unitarians, even though from a different country, in fellowship. We were going to take a 1.5-day long visit to Bucharest, learn about that particular town, then we were going to head up into the mountains, the Carpathian Mountains, and visit this Pelish castle, and then we were going to visit Dracula's castle. Then we're going to head down into Transylvania itself and visit different Unitarian churches that were really old, and more castles, and then we're going to sing 4 concerts. Eat a lot of food, find out what their cocktails were all about, and then come home. And I think that was a plan that everybody kind of really enjoyed. got to the first hotel, we checked in, we all went and had dinner together, and it was wonderful. The next day we got up and we were taken on a tour of Bucharest by a gentleman named Alex, who's a professional guide. And Alex was a Romanian and taught us, as he was showing us the different architecture in Bucharest, he was teaching us about all these other things, about how the communists took over in 1945 and left in 1989. How the Eastern Orthodox or Romanian Orthodox Church actually controls the country, both religiously and politically. And then he told us a story, and that's where it really started. And he said, you know, I'm 28 years old, so I was born in 1988. Communism ended in 1989, but because my parents were raised as communists, they knew nothing else. So they actually raised me as a communist also. And it wasn't really until maybe the year 2000 or so that stopped. And I think we were all sitting there listening to that, and that's when the first tears started to come. Because I don't think that I realized that that could even possibly happen. When we went to the next part of our trip, which was of course Transylvania, then it became a different thing. These particular people who live in Transylvania originally were part of Hungary for hundreds of years. Then after World War I was over and the countries were, redistricted or just realigned, these people were born in Hungary and all of a sudden they're not Hungarians anymore. And it's like their country was taken away from them. And still to this day they consider themselves Hungarians. They do not consider themselves Romania even though they live in Romania. The only thing they talked about when it came to that whole thing was they took our country away from us. They took our country away from us. But we're Hungarians, even though we live in Romania.
The acoustics of wherever we were so much better than actually our own church, but also the reverberation. So often we saw Tom leading the choir, and he would hold out the ending of the note long, and then we'd all look up into the air. He'd look up into the air and we followed and would listen for the reverberations after we'd stopped singing. And it was so beautiful, it was so memorable. That was such a great part of it. That was such a vivid, emotional experience to feel that our music went out there and we heard it reverberate. It reverberated far beyond us.
When we walked into those churches, it was more than they were just welcoming. It was excitement about these are Unitarian Universalists from the United States. And we were singing for this group of Unitarians who came to us. And I described it like there was like this thread of energy in almost every show that just, as the concert went on, it just grew and it glowed and it hummed, and it was just this wonderful feeling. And then going around the countryside and meeting the people and looking at the churches and hearing about the backgrounds. And there's something about any historical place you visit where if you know a little bit of the history and you can learn it and it's, well, that's interesting. But to be in that place where it happened, that power of place, it just kind of grabs you. We were at this church where the Edict of Tolerance, which was Francis David convinced the king that we had to show religious tolerance for all faiths, and the king agreed with that, and But to be in the place where that happened, and basically where our faith was born, you know, that was pretty cool.
Then we headed into Transylvania, which is in the valley between the Carpathian Mountains, which is shaped like a horseshoe. And we spent the next 6 or 7 days in Transylvania. When we sang at our second church, there was about 4 or 5 of us setting up all the equipment in the church, and the rest of the choir was actually in their social room. And all of a sudden when we were there, a young couple came in and they sat back in the corner. And we then heard that people were upset by that because it's inappropriate for men and women to sit together in these churches, especially in this one. Oh, it's 125 years in the past. In Transylvania, it absolutely is. We got to that church at about 10:15 in the morning, and we were welcomed with amazingly open arms. We went to their church service where the minister talked about the tree of life, our own church, in Hungarian, of course. And then we sang just a wonderful 1-hour concert that the people just loved. And when the concert was over, the minister came up to us, and he was actually maybe even a little bit bothered that he didn't have a present for us. And he went back to the altar, where he had some peonies on the altar, and he comes up with these peonies and actually blesses us by pulling the petals off and tossing them at the choir as a blessing. And everybody in the choir just goes. It was like the greatest thing we've ever seen. And after that, we all went to the social room and had lunch, which ended up being a 4-course meal. And all of a sudden, the meal was over, and the minister gets up with the ladies of the church, and they start singing songs to us with him playing guitar. And they sang from our own hymnal, "Come Sing a Song With Me," and then "We Shall Overcome." And I would say by the middle of We Shall Overcome, pretty much everybody in the room was crying. Never was there an experience in my life like that. And then, of course, they finished us off with singing a song in Hungarian, which couldn't have been better. We get on the bus to go, and every one of them comes outside and lines up on the sidewalk and waves to us goodbye. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the best day of our life. It really was. We visited a couple of days later the frescoed church in Székelyhegyes, which is the only Unitarian UNESCO heritage site in the world. I'm not sure exactly when it was built, in the 1300s. The Unitarians had it for a while in the 1600s, I believe, and now it still is a Unitarian church to this day. But when the Unitarians got there, in our own fashion, they decided to whitewash all these walls. And I believe it was in the 1970s, somebody said, you know, we should see what's under that whitewash. And they took it off, and here's these amazing frescoes that are just covering these walls. And it's a sight to behold. It's a sight to behold. And so we're looking at all this stuff in just amazement. And then our guide, Chilla, gets up in the front, and we're all just standing around her, and she starts to tell us, with the most amazing passion you have ever seen and felt, the history of the Unitarian Church and why they are who they are. And everybody is just amazed at what she is saying and how she is saying it, and we figured it out. We figured it out, what it was all about. You know, one God, the Bible was written by a bunch of guys, and take it as that. And in many, many more words, that's basically what she said. And then maybe the best thing of the trip for me happened. We got to sing in that church. And we're sitting there standing and singing beautifully. And I was sitting there thinking that, you know, who else has sung in this church? Who has preached in this church? Who has visited this church in the last 800 years? It was just amazing. And then we were done. And we're talking again to whoever we're talking, just chatting. And the lady who was, I'm going to say she was the caretaker of the church, all of a sudden she hears that there's a storm coming. And she says, I have to leave for a few minutes. She actually had to go and ring the bells to warn the people in the fields that there was a storm coming. Can't get any better than that.
And it's impossible to really fully express what that experience was like. But I hope that we can set up a partnership with the church, perhaps in Transylvania.
The UUPCC's hope is that groups that they take to Romania will ultimately work towards getting and finally get a partner church in Transylvania. That's their goal.
Yeah, we ought to have a sister church, and when we ought to solidify these connections, and we should host someone to come over here. And I mean, it's just made that more important to me.
We're brothers. We've got the same faith. You know, we really would like to help them and keep actually that flame alive, because that's the flame that we're living off of today. That flame, that flaming chalice that's over there is over here.
How does that help the world? I'm going back to children. I think it shows our children and their children that maybe the world's not such a big place, and we can take care of each other in a lot of different ways, and that we're more alike than we are different. I think that's how it helps.
So here we are at the entrance of Bran Castle, also known as Dracula's Castle. We're excited to get up there. It was built in the 14th century to guard the Bran Pass that was through the Carpathian Mountains. Vlad the Impaler was known as the Devil, Dracul. And you can see the teeming multitudes of people waiting to get in, just like us, and as excited as us. Can't wait to get up there.
Dracula's castle was truly cool. It was exactly as we expected to be. It even had a hidden staircase. But the strange part about it is that the Vlad the Impaler, who is kind of the guy that Dracula is loosely named after, never visited the castle. I guess he was in the area. Back in those days, which I guess was in the 1400s or so, Vlad the Impaler was a hero to about half the people and a villain to the other half. I mean, so this whole story was very, very strange. If you can picture the Appalachian Mountains, especially through Pennsylvania, West Virginia, You might be driving down the road, and in the distance you'll see this little town. And in the town is a church, a white steeple. This is probably the Baptist church or the Congregational church. Well, in Transylvania, when you're riding and you see that, here's the town, there's a little white steeple, that's the Unitarian church. It is very important that we all know about the roots, the history of the Unitarian church in Transylvania, so we can really figure out more about the Unitarian church worldwide.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe.
Walk naturally.
Natural, just walking and waiting.
Walk naturally. Hi, Tom.
This trip has impacted me immeasurably. The connection that we have felt with Unitarianism is so strong, and now I can't imagine that there was any other place in the world we should have gone.
I have found the country to be so rich in history and culture and beauty. As a Unitarian, this trip has changed me because it has made me aware of the long, long, long history of the church.
Seekers of truth and keepers of faith, we are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are.
I am so glad I came, and it has changed my life.
The beauty of Transylvania. I'm not sure I have ever seen a more glorious countryside and just physical beauty than this area.
Star rises and sings to the universe. Who we are.
I can't tell you just how amazing and wonderful this whole thing is, and I am so glad that we all took the chance to do it.
For each child that's born,